That was profound for me and everyone involved. It was the first time I ever felt, wow, we can really make a difference in this profession.
Welcome to In the Parks, an Indiana State Parks podcast. I'm Allison Martin, and I'm excited to tell the stories of these amazing places in the Hoosier State. I think our parks show off the best of Indiana, but there's so much more to them than you might expect. So let's go in depth to really know the stories and discover what makes each destination unique and valuable as part of Indiana. On In the Parks, you'll learn about the people, legends, and places that formed Indiana's parks in the past and who is writing the story now. Since it's officially summer, I'm excited to keep highlighting Indiana's reservoir properties, so you can have the best summer ever. And today we're going to Cecil M Harden Lake, more commonly known as Raccoon State Recreation Area. Cecil M Harden Lake is home to Raccoon State Recreation Area, the Mansfield Dam, and the nearby Mansfield Roller Mill, which means the same place goes by a lot of names. So before we get into anything else about the park, let's make sure we get the name right.
So it got renamed from Mansfield Lake.
So it's never been Raccoon Lake.
No, but we've always been Raccoon Lake State Recreation Area. So very confusing, I know. If you go to the dam, you can see on the tower it says Mansfield Dam. And a lot of the guys that first started fishing here back in the 60s, not too many of those guys left, but they have all called it Mansfield Lake. I believe the reason why we call it Raccoon Lake today is because Cecil M Harden is a lot harder to say. Even though she was a really cool person. She was a congresswoman, the second U.S. congresswoman, and she was very responsible for getting this project done. She helped pass the legislation for it, and she advocated to get it in this district. She represented Northern Parke County and Southern Fountain counties for 10 years. And her name is spelled like how you typically spell a man's name. So that's sort of an interesting little tidbit about her.
But it's Cecil, not Cecil.
Cecil.
Okay, I've been saying that wrong the whole time. So.
Cecil M Harden. She believed it would be a big boon to the local economy, which it definitely has been.
Now you know. If you want to feel superior, go with Cecil M Harden. If you want to sound local, go with Raccoon. And if you want to feel like an old-timer, go with Mansfield. No matter the name, if you've spent time at Turkey Run or Shades, you'll notice a lot of similar geological features at Cecil M Harden Lake, like the sandstone and ravines. Those parks aren't too far away, so you'll feel right at home here. Driving in, I was really struck by how beautiful and well-maintained the campground was. And then, of course, there's the amazing reservoir, the centerpiece and the reason the park exists. The lake is where we'll start today. A theme I did not expect to discover through this summer series is one of change, and honestly, the loss that exists in the midst of new opportunities. Every time we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to hundreds of other possibilities. The reservoir properties have made that really clear to me. Building a dam means creating a lake and park which can be enjoyed by thousands, even millions of people over the last 50 years. But it also means the loss of whatever community or families previously lived on the land. I've talked about this tension on past episodes about Monroe Lake and Salamone, and it'll come up again today and in future episodes about Mississinawa and Brookville Lakes, even Potato Creek State Park. As I've considered the changes people went through as dams went up and homes were torn down, that tension between loss and opportunity was resolved a little for me when I heard the stories of people who lived on the land in the past. It's like by giving them a voice, even if it's a quiet voice speaking from the past, I can acknowledge the lives that were once here. It helps me appreciate places like Cecil M Harden Lake even more, knowing they were loved and treasured by people just like me for hundreds of years. So let's hear one of those stories now from our guide today, Ross Plotkin, the interpretive naturalist at Cecil M Harden Lake. He shared with me about the town of Portland Mills, which was once along Big Raccoon Creek.
Since we are a reservoir, there was a time before the reservoir. It was finished in 1960, filled up for the first time in 1961. So that was when they eminent domained and they bought up all of the land that was going to be flooded. So the village that was removed, all but 2 homes had to be removed, and it's unique compared to the other reservoirs because it's not actually in the bottom of the reservoir. It's right where the creek becomes the lake. And it was a town right along the creek, and it had a mill, it had a church, and it had a whole community. Like a lot of rural towns, though, it was struggling in the 50s. There were about 50 people that still lived there, including a few folks that I've managed to speak to personally and get their stories about, including at a first day hike on January 1st in 2019, where Red Williams, who had been 12 at the time that they were removed from the property, got to tell us his story.
Even though Red Williams was a kid when it happened, the loss of his home and community left a major impression on him and others. Decades later, the Portland Mills Church still hosts an annual homecoming event to reunite people from their town and their descendants. Red was at that event and came to a first-day hike where Ross led a group through the park on January 1st, sharing the history of Portland Mills and more.
Very strong feelings about it. In fact, he was incredibly touched by the entire experience. He came up to us afterwards and thanked us for the opportunity to tell his story to 106 people that showed up on 40-degree day in January, and mucking through the mud to go see these the ruins of his house. He got to tell the story at where his house was. We went to the mill where he had stories about him and his brother, and so he said, I think it was 50 years of bitterness was gone. He was able to finally tell a story, and he was able to move on. That was profound for me and everyone involved. It was the first time I ever felt, wow, we can really make a difference in this profession.
Other families in the area whose homes were removed were the Berry and Payne families. Ross has had other people donate memories of their ancestors who grew up in the area too. He showed me some pictures and journals as we talked.
So that was a lady who, this is about the mill, so her great-great-aunt, so that would be her great-great-aunt. She died when she was 16, but she wrote this when she was 15. They left Mansfield for Brazil, Indiana, which is like 12 miles down the road, and she knew she was never going to see Mansfield again. And so she wrote a poem lamenting about the creek and where she was. And I'm always willing to accept more donations.
If people have that history.
Yes.
Ross wants to really protect and understand the history of the area. There's a book he has called Portland Mills Remembered, if you'd like to learn more. At the Portland Mills ramp, there's a Portland Mills historic site which is cared for by local organizations. There are still ruins in the woods, stoops and chimneys and foundations, but remember, they aren't for taking home as souvenirs. They were people's homes who are still in the area. Also, before you get offended that the 1950s homes are considered ruins, it might make you feel a little better to know a lot of those homes were built in the late 1800s. Ross hasn't always been the go-to person for Mansfield, Cecil M Harden Lake, and Raccoon SRA history. He's worked at the park for 11 years, but his degree was actually in political science. After starting out admittedly not knowing a lot about the property, now he is an expert on all things park related. He knows a lot about a lot.
So the animals that live here, the flowers that can be found here, the plants, the trees, the history that's here has been a big one that I've been doing a lot of research on over the years. Especially this past winter, I did some research for our first day hike, which was the hidden history of the beach, where we walked around and pointed out things that people see every single day and told them how they had historical significance. That's one of my favorite things to do here, one of my favorite programs to run.
While we're talking history and telling stories from the past, let's learn a little more about the area by going to a historic site about 15 minutes from the lake. The state park also manages the Mansfield Roller Mill. You might be familiar with Mansfield if you've ever been to the Parke County Covered Bridge Festival, because it's one of the hot spots to visit. The Mansfield Mill and area around it are one of those back-in-time moments. It's a 3-story white building with 9 windows spaced evenly across each side like a dice. Behind the mill flows Big Raccoon Creek, and there's a small dam which was used to power the turbine in the mill. Grassy banks, picnic tables, and a small wooden bridge, plus the striking red covered bridge, make for a picturesque scene. The creek crosses one of Indiana's fault lines. You'll notice a small drop in the flow of water. It feels like quintessential small-town Indiana and holds a lot of history for this section of the state. Having this mill gives Indiana some bragging rights in the historic buildings game.
A treasure, a working turbine in its original location. That is something that a lot of states don't even have.
If you've been to the mill at Spring Mill State Park and wondered what happened next in the whole journey of mills, well, Mansfield Mill is that next step. Spring Mill's grist mill was built by 1820 and operated until the 1870s. You can hear all about how it works in an earlier In the Parks episode. By the 1880s, when the Mansfield roller mill was operating, technology had come a long way.
So much advancement was made. Although with Spring Mill, you had some new concepts that were being introduced at the time, which was the bedrock for what came later.
Some of those innovations include how water was used. At Spring Mill, you'll see a water wheel, but at Mansfield Mill, there is no water wheel because the mill wouldn't have had one. Its power came from a turbine, which was below the basement of the mill, actually underwater. Turbines were an improvement from mills because they required less water force, less maintenance, and since the turbine was underwater, it could still be used when the nearby creek was frozen. There are several factors that make the Mansfield mill stand out.
We actually are turbine driven. Yes, it still works. Most of the equipment in here is restored to operability. Operability and most of the equipment in here is original to this mill, and what's not original to this mill is original to other mills. This place operated exactly how a modern day mill operated. When we used to grind, we had to go and buy corn from a mill, so I kind of know how the modern mill operates too. And so getting to compare the two, this was the development of the modern way of us grinding. So you'll notice we have rollers instead of stones. 1884, 4 years after the building was built, 6 years after they were introduced into the United States commercially, this mill switched to rollers.
So they were a little bit ahead of their time.
So Jacob Rahm, this was not his first mill, it was his fifth. His others were all steam powered. So this gave him the opportunity to test out better methods and efficiency while not having to burn fuel to run it, since this is water powered. And our turbine has been powering the mill since 1886. I think that's also what makes our mill kind of special, is that there wasn't any rebuilding done here. There was renovations. We had to put new siding on the building, but the structure, everything was all here. And on the upper floors, the equipment was all there. Not in good shape. It was in awful shape, but it existed, and so it could be fixed.
Ross showed my friend Jenny and me around the mill, explaining what was milled there.
Started out as just a flour mill, and then they made it a cornmeal processing facility as well. In 1892, they added the cornmeal. In the 1920s, late 1920s, they actually just shut down its food production, so only the corn machine was operating after that, making feed.
The Mansfield mill also includes other innovations that were created by a man named Oliver Evans.
Oliver Evans was the guy responsible for that. Now, he lived in Vermont, never lived in Indiana, probably never even came here. But his inventions made their way here in the early 1800s. He died in 1819, but he wrote a book before he died called The Practical Miller's Guide, and it was a revolutionary text. It pretty much upended everything anyone knew about milling at the time.
One of those inventions Oliver Evans made is on display in the mill. It's a system of grain elevators and spouts that use mechanical power instead of human power. It's hard to imagine because it seems so logical now, but before Evans, mills had basically been the same since the 1500s. Men, and often boys, literally carried bags of corn or wheat up and down stairs, wasting time and energy. By using spouts, elevators, and conveyors powered by water, Evans helped mill operators save time and energy.
So that guy I mentioned earlier, Oliver Evans, he's the major inventor for modern milling. He's actually one of our earliest inventors. He even came up with a steam engine that didn't end up getting commercial use, but it was used as a sort of method or practical model for later inventions in steam engines. But his big legacy comes from the production of food by automating the process.
Right.
So before him, this was not an automated process. It was all hand done.
And carrying sacks everywhere versus being able to use this grain elevator. Huge
Or
difference.
in some cases, they would shovel it, but you'd have to shovel it from the machine into a cart and then from the cart into a machine. And who are you going to get to shovel all of that? Well, you don't want to pay an adult that wage, so it was usually kids. There was a whole lot of stuff he did, but there was a very dangerous thing that he created, his first big milling machine called the Hopper Boy. And it was called the Hopper Boy because it took out a job that was done by boys, usually 10 to 12-year-olds.
By removing dangerous work from young boys, Evans was also making mills safer, and his automations made mills more profitable. I mean, constantly, any industry, people are looking for more efficient, better ways to do it, so you can produce more, you can sell more, you get more profit out of it. To see that advancement in 50 years in the same state is pretty cool.
Yep. From 1880 to 1920, the amount of changes in the industry. And then in the 1920s came regulation that had to change the industry. There was a lot of research that had been done to find out why people were getting sick from grain. They found out that wood contains pathogens. It's very hard to clean, and so it was getting people sick. And so in the late 1920s, mills had to switch over to stainless steel if they wanted to produce food grade. And of course, for a little mill like this, which at that point, the guy who built it is already dead, his kids don't want to be millers anymore, And so they sold the place. So that's the Rom family sold it to the Reeves family. And then the Reeves and Son ran it until 67. So they made animal feed because there's less restrictions on feed.
So it was easier to change what you're milling than to change all of your equipment.
Yep.
Now, mills were still really dangerous. With so much dust from either grain, corn, or both, and a building full of wood, including all wooden equipment, the smallest spark could spell disaster.
So it's already a bit of a problem with flammable grain dust everywhere, but then you produced it at a higher volume at a much finer rate. Actually, the year this mill was built, there was a major catastrophe up north at the General Mills mill in, I believe, Wisconsin, and it blew the top off a 7-story building. So this mill, in order to combat that, on the upper floors, they added in cyclone sifters, which actually suck in the grain, suck the air in, push the grain to the outside so it can then be rebagged, and then purifies the air more or less.
Ross took us up to the 2nd and 3rd floors to show us how fire dangers were minimized. We saw the flour dresser, which filtered out particles, the corn cleaner, a bleacher, and the massive sifter. We also saw a picture of the General Mills fire after the explosion. All ye who enter here leave pipe and cigar behind. Okay, that...
And that is why.
Wow, that's
Yes.
the... open. Look at that picture.
That's the Minneapolis General Mills mill.
That is literally a higher explosion than the building.
Yeah.
That is
And you
insane.
can see the pieces of the building.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, that was bad. So that was the same year this mill was built. And so that's why this giant tin can thing over there exists.
Thankfully, fire did not come to this mill. The way new technology was implemented allowed for the next steps forward in the industry.
Studying of all this history, it's really shown me just how we have such a shallow idea of the past because we think of them as ignorant when in fact they were much more intelligent than we
Very
give them credit
intelligent.
for.
Yeah.
That intelligence is also on display in the practical sayings we have that still exist today. If you listen to the Spring Mill episode, you'll remember the saying, "Keep your nose to the grindstone," came from a mill. Well, guess what? There are other sayings that did too. Like someone being a millstone around your neck, the rule of thumb, and one more. Well, or show us your metal. I didn't know the stone fragments or metal would become embedded under his skin. By showing his metal, the dresser could prove he had a lot of experience. And then that's interesting too. What happened to the Mansfield mill? It was the end of the 1960s when the mill finally closed. While the owners were excited about the reservoir being formed, hoping it would bring more business to their mill, it wasn't enough to keep it going. The 50s and 60s brought a lot of transition and changes to the area, and honestly, it seems like for the town of Mansfield, the new dam and lake were the least of those changes. Because while those were being built, the mill was shutting down and the entire community was about to change.
So in 67, Mr. Reeves, his dad has passed, and it's becoming harder and harder to run this mill. He's basically taking on debt. He runs out of money. And the mill, their farm, and their house all went up for sale. And a guy by the name of Tex Terry bought it. He wanted to turn this place into Old Westville. It was going to be a theme park. And so he was going to have shootouts in the street, cowboys and stuff.
In Mansfield?
Yes, that was the whole point of what he was going to turn Mansfield into.
Texas Old West theme park plan didn't go over super well.
So he failed in his ambition to turn this into a theme park. The handful of people that still lived there at the time were not okay with having a theme park in their beloved small town. But if you'll notice, the buildings all kind of look kind of like that. And so some of that was built by him.
Tex Terry ended up selling what he'd purchased in the town, and the new owners had another vision.
So he sold it off to the Frasers, and the Frasers turned it into a festival town instead. The Covered Bridge Festival was already going on at that point, so they just went ahead and fully invested into that. But they also had events going on throughout the rest of the year, and that didn't stop until the early 2000s.
Driving through Mansfield to the mill was surreal. I've been to the Covered Bridge Festival and didn't even consider that hardly anyone lived there the rest of the year. I assumed the vendors were locals and people from around the state who came in to sell for the festival and then they left, and everyone in Mansfield went about their business. But that's not the case. For most of the year, it's a ghost town. The buildings and structures, which are about the size of freestanding garages, are boarded up, waiting for the big events scattered throughout the year. It was such a contrast, the vibrant, high-energy fairground feel I'd experienced last fall, and the eerie quiet in between. Now, the creative development side of me wants to see the town thriving year-round. I see its beauty and potential with the red-covered bridge, the scenic picnicking spot by the creek becoming a town center. But Ross reminded me that festival season is so popular, many people can support themselves on these events alone. So there it is again. There's loss, but there's opportunity, and it may not always look the way we expect. The next events in Mansfield you should add to your calendar are the Cornbread Festival in early September and the iconic Parke County Covered Bridge Festival in October that spans, yes, the entire county. Plus, in April you'll find the Mushroom Festival. And speaking of mushrooms, I think it's time we head back to Cecil M Harden Lake, because Ross told me mushroom hunters will be happy with the options there. Let's go learn about the natural world at Raccoon SRA, along with the events and activities they have year-round. And I already know if you're a mushroom hunter, you like festivals and events. After all, you're a pretty fun guy.
With the Mansfield Mill, we participate in a mushroom festival every spring at the end of April, it's the last weekend of April. The rest of the village does the actual festival and stuff. The mill just kind of participates. We just open up.
Along with morels, you'll find other mushroom varieties.
We've got chanterelles and turkey tail and a bunch of other kind of fungus for those mushroom hunters that like that stuff.
And remember how I said the park looked similar to Shades and Turkey Run? Here's the geological reason why.
Folks don't know, we do have canyons here, just like Turkey Run. It's the same sandstone with a very similar story of how it was laid down. But we also have some older sedimentary rock. And where the dam is located was where the last glacier ended. There was a lobe of it that ended right there at the bottom of the lake, which is actually what pushed up the hills that now form the right and the left side of the dam.
Since it was my first time at the park and I wanted to get in some hiking to see some of the ravines as well as the water, I asked Ross for his recommendations. The trails at the park are all 1 to 2 miles, and you won't find anything quite as hard as Turkey Run or Shades, which honestly may be more your style. The great thing is, the scenery is still amazing and the hiking was really nice.
I have 2 favorite trails, Trail 4 and Trail 5. And they probably really couldn't be more different. So Trail 4 starts between Whitetail and Lakeview camping loops. It runs along the top of a canyon that is formed between Lakeview and Whitetail. There's an observation platform, follows around the back end of Whitetail, and then it comes up alongside Whitetail in another canyon that's between Whitetail and Raccoon Run. That one is significantly longer and bigger, has some really cool S-curves. So that one's really neat. And it stays along the tops for most of it.
We hiked most of Trail 4, but a portion was underwater, so we had to skip the second half. I really liked the glimpses of the lake through the leaves and spotting boats docked below us as people fished or sunbathed. We even saw a dog on deck wearing his own life jacket. There are several places you can slip down to the lake, as well as those ravines to look down into. The other trail Ross recommended was Trail 5.
Trail 5 so Trail 4 has terrain, it's moderate, there's stairs, there's some slopes and things. Trail 5 actually only has 1 set of stairs on the whole thing and 2 bridges. It goes through the woods, through a upland forest, and then it goes out into a managed wildflower grass plot.
Did you catch that? A managed wildflower field, which should be blooming right now.
July is usually when it's great, and then it's flowering all the way through October. My wife and I actually did our wedding photos in that field in September. It was all goldenrod, but it was beautiful. And goldenrod is a native plant. People often treat it like a weed, but it is a native plant. And it gets a bunch of asters and stuff in the fall, so it gets real pretty. We try and manage that. We'll burn it every now and then to maintain it.
There's one more trail to note, the archery trail.
So it's marked as Trail 6. It has 2 ponds, and it's got 5 3D targets and 5 range targets, starting from 10 to 50 yards.
People bring their own, legit bow and arrow and are just doing target practice while walking on this loop?
Yes. When you get to one of the 3D targets on the trail, it has a stand and everything for you to set your bow up, put your arrows in, and all of that. There's little mini ranges throughout the trail, and then there's a main range. Bring your own equipment. It's no broadheads allowed, so field points only, just for target practice.
Anyone is free to use the archery trail too. Olympic hopefuls, 4-H and scout groups, or Hunger Games enthusiasts.
We'll see a lot ramp up in September, but then we also have local 4-H groups that will come out and utilize the trail, and we'll let them use it. So I think just recently they brought out 30 or 40 kids to come out and practice out on it. Gives them kind of an opportunity. And the targets, it's like a deer, coyote, a raccoon. So it kind of gives you some different complexity.
In addition to history and hiking, we're missing the whole point of the summer series, lake life.
Boating is probably our number one activity, followed by the beach.
The park has 5 boat access ramps around the lake and 2 marinas that are open May through October. There are boat rentals as well, and I've included a link to Raccoon Lake Boat Rental in the show notes so you can check out their options. While some lakes are paddle friendly, this is the spot for bigger boats. There are certain lakes that are like, yes, we've got a lot of the small stuff, but it sounds like Raccoon Lake is better for bigger ones.
Yes, there are parts of the lake that could
Cecil M Harden Lake.
Yeah. Yes, the primary users out here are going to be motorboats. You've got a wide variety of what that means, from fishermen to people just swimming off their pontoon to people actually going up and down in the S-curves, because our lake has some pretty sharp S-curves, with like jet skis, water skis, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of wake action starting in the late morning typically, and then into the afternoon. So fishermen like to get out early, or they like to fish on weekdays when they don't have the wave action. There's also the entire north part of the lake, north of the bridge. That's all idle zone.
The fishing at the lake is also excellent, including the second largest striped bass caught in the state.
We had held the record striped bass since 2010. Mr. Van Hook caught it, 39.09 pounds. Unfortunately, they caught a bigger one, a 40-pounder, near the Ohio River. So that one has beat out our record. But this is still a spot that people come specifically for stripers and also crappie. But we've also got white bass fishermen and catfish fishermen and tons of bluegill. In fact, we put some habitat out there, and we do a few maps here at the park office of where to find that. But we put cribs and rock beds and a few other things out there to give structure so that the fish could grow bigger. They won't get eaten immediately when they're teeny tiny, and so they can grow bigger and get to adulthood. We, being us, the Army Corps, and the Fish and Wildlife, who was in charge of the project, we all kind of came together and put all that out there. So it's about almost 30 acres of habitat out in our lake.
Many people spending time on the water are also camping at the park. Again, driving in, I was so impressed by the campsites. They were so inviting, beautiful, well manicured, wide open with shade trees. The grass was bright green, a benefit to all the rain we've had in the summer, but still neatly mowed and tidy. Ross said that's the goal.
The number one thing that people tell us is we're the cleanest park they've ever been to. And so we take a lot of pride in that. We make sure that we can live up to that claim. We like to keep the grass mowed. We don't like long grass or grass getting out of control. We like to make sure that the bathrooms are clean, and that is testament to our housekeeper, Michelle. She is phenomenal and does a really good job on that. We also like to pick up the trash. Everyone on staff is responsible for helping to pick up the trash, but they will even schedule people specifically to go around and pick up trash. And we ask our guests a lot through the Explore Pin program and through just some of our other volunteer opportunities to help us go around and pick up trash.
This is your reminder that if you officially volunteer for 40 hours at Indiana State Parks in a year, your state park pass is covered for the next year. Connect with the park office any place you go and see how you can officially volunteer. Picking up trash is an easy way to help out and keep all our parks looking sharp. That crisp, freshly mowed look is the aesthetic Raccoon SRA is going for.
Everything is mowed, so there's no barriers between sites. Some people don't particularly like that because they feel they're a little close to the other site. Other people absolutely love it, especially if they're camping in groups or if they just are very social campers who like to say hi to their neighbors. There's a few other campgrounds I've been to that are like that, but there's also a lot of the ones where I've been to where they let stuff grow up between the sites for that sort of privacy or barrier. But we get a lot of compliments on the way that our campground looks, so we like to try and keep it to what our visitors expect.
When walking through the campground, I didn't think the sites were too close. They looked spaced out nicely to me, but weren't isolated. Now, if you prefer your park be more nature than nurture, the property does have that too.
And we have parts of the park that are more nature-y, Berry Drive, Trail 5 area, where you can kind of get off into the woods on a trail and you can kind of pretend that you're away from everything. Trail 1 is a great one like that. It's our hardest trail, but it's great for that.
The campground offers a lot of options for people. Again, whether you want more curated campsites or prefer the primitive option.
In the campground, we have, I think, 320-ish sites, 33 primitive, I think about 50 non-electric, which are also the Lakeview sites, are the ones without electricity. And then we have Raccoon Run, which is the one you were describing. That's the real nice loop. And then Whitetail and Songbird. Those are all electric. And we also have one full hookup site that is available for reservation in Whitetail.
I'm sure that is a hot property.
Yes, it's usually booked through the summer. This person leaves, another person comes in. So the campground itself, so it's near the main ramp, but in order to get to the beach, you have to walk on the Centennial Trail, which is a paved trail. It's about 0.8 of a mile. You've got the camp store right there next to the campground. There's a shelter house where we sometimes do programs, but it's also reservable, chapel shelter. There's another one deeper in the campground that's non-reservable, just for people to picnic at. And there's a lot of fishing access that comes off of the campground through various spots. And we do have a few primitive sites that might also appeal to people that are looking for something a little bit more off from the mode campground look. We have, I think, about 6 sites in primitive out of the 33 that are sort of wooded. And so those get booked a lot.
No matter what kind of camper you are, or even if you aren't into camping, be sure you take note of the fun events that happen all year long. Now, unfortunately, we just missed one of the park's major events, the 4th of July celebration. But it sounds like the campground fills up fast for this, so now you have a heads up to reserve your spot for next year.
We have our fireworks coming up on the 5th. We do a sandcastle contest in the morning and then a cornhole tournament in the afternoon. And then the fireworks are at dusk. They shoot them off from South Point. So yeah, that is a big event. Anywhere between, 10 and 20,000 people. Thousands of boats. And then just in the beach area, there's usually between 3,000 and 8,000 people.
That sounds really amazing. Thankfully, the next event you can be part of. Coming up on August 9th is the Smokey Bear Pedal Parade to celebrate Smokey Bear's 81st birthday.
And then we have our Smokey Bear Pedal Parade on the 9th of August this year. We'll be celebrating that like we do every year, where Smokey comes out. We have a little birthday party where it's just all about educating people about Smokey and fire safety and stuff like that. He pops in at the end, and then he gets in a gator and leads the parade through the campground. And then all the kids are on their bikes and stuff, and they get to decorate their bikes and parade them through the campground.
I mean, how cute is that? Another ideal time for camping and visiting the property is during that Parke County Covered Bridge Festival, which is mid-October. Not only will you find plenty of festival fun in Mansfield by the mill, the nearby city of Rockville and the historic Billy Creek Village are incredibly charming to visit then too. Let's hear from Kristen, another Parke staff member.
I'm Kristen Luce. I'm the assistant property manager. I've been here a little over a year. I worked at 2 other parks before I came here. I would say probably the reason why people should come here is we've got really great fishing, a lot of boating activities, and we have a lovely campground. A lot of our sites are paved back there. We have a great beach. It's very large compared to a lot of other properties. And we have a great location. I love the little town of Rockville. There's, of course, the Covered Bridge Festival everybody loves. Usually always completely booked up for that.
Kristen also provided me with a lot of excellent recommendations for what to eat in town.
I really like going to the Belmore store in Tant. That one has a lot of Amish treats. And then I really like Golden Forest for coffee. I go there a lot. The ranch across the street, if you're looking for lunch, is really good. Now there's a 36 Saloon, which has pretty good food, especially on the weekends. They have Hog Pit, which is a barbecue. My favorite thing ever.
That sounds really good.
Yeah.
So for all the people who are also camping and are tired of what they brought, they've got a lot. That's true. Some campgrounds, there's like nothing. You better bring all your food because you're going to have to drive 30 minutes to find any place.
Yeah.
Here, you can really pop in pretty close if you want.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had more time to try out all the places she suggested. Like most state parks, keep your eyes open for Halloween activities too, including a costume contest. As Jenny and I pulled out of the park, we got to talk to Tom, the gatehouse attendant, more affectionately known as the guy with the big mustache. I recorded our conversation on my phone, but unfortunately the audio was too hard to hear. Tom told us he has the best seat in the house though, He's seen a red fox and a bobcat from the gatehouse, which makes me really jealous. Seeing a bobcat in the wild, from a distance, is still on my bucket list. But most important of all, Tom gets to greet everyone coming in with a welcoming smile and send them home with a wave goodbye. Cecil M Harden Lake knows about change, but it also knows about opportunities. The reservoirs have helped me consider how to make sacrifices now with the expectation that my new choices will provide a better future. Now, there's no guarantee. All the reservoir plans carried with them inherent risks, but the people who advocated for the lakes and recreation areas across the state, people like Cecil M Harden and many others, they had one thing in common: hope. So even with the loss and tension that we can't ignore, I also want to connect with the hope people had decades ago. The hope that the parks would be cared for and cherished by even more people in the future. And thankfully, that paid off because Cecil M Harden Lake and Raccoon State Recreation Area are still beloved places for thousands of people. And if you haven't been there yet, this is your sign to spend a little more time in the parks. A big thank you to Tom at the Gatehouse, Kristen Luce, and Ross Plotkin from Cecil M Harden Lake for sharing their time and knowledge with me. In the Parks is not officially associated with Indiana DNR, but I'm so grateful for all the work they do for our parks. Please share this podcast with your friends, and if you could, leave it a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. You can follow along on Instagram and Facebook at In the Parks Online for more state parks content and my recommendations for the best places to get ice cream or sweet treats near each park. Take advantage of Kristen's recommendations this time. She is the local expert. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the parks.